The day we buried my father, the sky was a bruised purple, heavy with rain that refused to fall. I stood by the grave, my shoes sinking into the mud, while my stepmother, Linda, stood under a large black umbrella held by her personal assistant. She wasn't crying. In fact, if you looked closely behind her designer sunglasses, she looked bored. She was checking her watch every 2 minutes, probably calculating how long she had to wait before she could list my father's estate on the market. My dad was a good man, a self-made construction mogul who built skyscrapers from the ground up. But after my mom died, he was vulnerable. That's when Linda swooped in. She was 20 years younger than him, charming and absolutely ruthless. Over the last 5 years, she had slowly isolated him. She fired his loyal staff, changed the house locks, and made sure I could only visit with an appointment. I tried to warn him, but he was blinded by love, or maybe just the fear of dying alone. Last week, he died of a sudden heart attack, and yesterday, at the reading of the will, my worst fears were confirmed. The lawyer's office was cold and smelled of expensive leather. Mr. Henderson, my father's attorney for 30 years, refused to look me in the eye. He cleared his throat and began to read. To my devoted wife, Linda, I leave the mansion in the Hamptons, the investment portfolio, all offshore accounts, and the controlling shares of the company. Linda let out a small, satisfied sigh. She squeezed my hand, her long red fingernails digging into my skin. Don't worry, honey, she whispered, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. I'll make sure you get a nice allowance. The lawyer continued. To my son, Jason, I leave the contents of my old fishing cabin at Lake Clearwater and the rusty key to his grandfather's lockbox. Linda actually laughed. It was a sharp, cruel sound. The fishing cabin, she mocked. That rotting pile of wood in the middle of nowhere. Oh, Jason, enjoy your termites. I walked out of that office with nothing but a rusty iron key in my pocket and a hole in my chest. I didn't care about the billions. I cared that my father, the man who taught me how to ride a bike and build a treehouse, had apparently forgotten who I was. Or so I thought. I drove 4 hours north to Lake Clearwater. The cabin was exactly as Linda described. It dilapidated, overgrown with weeds, and smelling of damp wood. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. It was empty, save for a single wooden chair and a dusty bed frame. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding that rusty key, and for the first time since he died, I cried. But as I sat there, I noticed something. The floorboards beneath my feet didn't creak like the rest of the house. They felt solid. Too solid. I knelt down and pulled at the edge of the rug. Underneath, one of the floorboards had a small notch, perfectly sized for a finger. I pried it open. There was no gold inside. No cash, just a small, high-tech metal safe bolted into the foundation. It looked out of place in this old wooden shack. I pulled the rusty key from my pocket. It looked too old for this modern safe. But when I slid it into the hidden keyhole behind the digital pad, it turned with a smooth, satisfying click. The safe door popped open. Inside, there were stacks of red folders and a single flash drive. On top of the pile was a letter in my father's handwriting. It read, Jason, if you are reading this, then I am gone. And if the will was read the way I suspect, Linda thinks she has won. She hasn't. I knew she was poisoning me, son. I knew she was stealing from the company, but I needed proof, and I needed to keep you safe until I had it all. Everything is in here. Take back what is yours. My hands shook as I opened the folders. It was all there. Surveillance photos of Linda meeting with our biggest corporate rival. Bank statements showing her siphoning millions into shell companies. But the darkest part was the medical log. My father had been documenting his symptoms for months: dizziness, nausea, memory loss, all coinciding with the vitamins Linda insisted he take. He had sent samples of his blood to a private lab. The results were stapled to the back. High concentrations of arsenic. She didn't just steal his money. She stole his life. I didn't go back to the lawyer. I didn't confront Linda. I went straight to the FBI. They spent 3 days verifying the data on the flash drive. It was a treasure trove of evidence, implicating not just Linda, but her secret lover, who happened to be the CFO of my father's company. 2 weeks later, Linda threw a massive gala at the mansion to celebrate her newfound freedom and position as CEO. She invited the press, the city's elite, and every board member. I wasn't invited, but I showed up anyway. I stood at the back of the ballroom as Linda took the stage in a shimmering gold dress. She raised a glass of champagne. "To my late husband," she said, managing to squeeze out a fake tear. "I promise to carry on his legacy." That's when the double doors burst open. The music stopped. A team of federal agents swarmed the room. The lead agent walked right up to the stage. "Linda Vance," he boomed, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "You are under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and first-degree murder." The glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the stage. The silence in the room was deafening. She looked at the crowd. Then she saw me standing by the exit. Her face went pale. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just tapped my pocket where the rusty key used to be. Because of the Slayer rule in the U.S. legal system, a murderer cannot inherit property from their victim. The will was voided. The assets were frozen and then transferred to the next of kin. Me. I got the house, the company, and the justice my father deserved. I sold the mansion. I couldn't stand the sight of it. I kept the fishing cabin, though. I renovated it. It's where I go now to think and to remember the man who was smart enough to play the long game, even from the grave. Being fired is hard. Being fired for something you didn't do is harder. But being fired by the man who stole your work, while he smirks at you from the corner office, that creates a different kind of anger. It's a cold, calculating anger. I'm Sarah. For 5 years, I was the lead system architect at Technova. I practically lived in the server room. I drank more energy drinks than water and slept under my desk more times than I care to admit. We were working on Project Ether, a revolutionary AI algorithm that was supposed to change the logistics industry forever. It was my baby. I wrote 90% of the source code. My manager, let's call him Chad, was the type of guy who failed upwards. He couldn't write a line of code if his life depended on it. But he was great at playing golf with the CEO and taking credit for my work during board meetings. I tolerated him because I loved the project. I thought my work would speak for itself. I was wrong. 2 days before the global launch of Project Ether, I was called into human resources. The walk to the office felt like a funeral march. When I entered, the HR director wouldn't look at me. Chad was sitting in the corner, looking smug. "Sarah," the HR director said, sliding a packet of papers across the table, "we found evidence that you've been communicating with our competitors. We have emails sent from your account attaching proprietary source code." I was stunned. I grabbed the papers. They were obvious fabrications. "This is fake," I shouted. "Look at the timestamps. I was in the secure server room during these times. There's no external internet access in there. Check the security logs." "We can't trust you anymore," Chad interrupted, standing up. "We can't risk the launch. Pack your things. Security will escort you out. You have 15 minutes. I looked at Chad, and I saw it in his eyes. He had messed up something in the final integration, hadn't he? He needed a scapegoat. If the launch failed, he could blame the disgruntled employee who sabotaged the code. If it succeeded, he would take all the credit. They escorted me out like a criminal in front of my entire team. My reputation in Silicon Valley was ruined instantly. Once you're branded a corporate spy, your career is over. I went home and sat in the dark, staring at my laptop screen. I wanted to scream. I wanted to sue, but I knew Teknova had an army of lawyers. I couldn't win a legal battle. But then, I remembered something. See, every good architect leaves a back door. Not a malicious one, but a maintenance protocol. Years ago, I installed a dead man's switch deep in the server kernel. It was designed to ensure that the system adminima was active. If I didn't log in biometrically every 7 days to authorize the admin privileges, the system would assume the admin was compromised. It would then initiate a lockdown protocol to protect the data. I decided to do nothing. I didn't hack them. I didn't steal data. I just waited. Day 1 passed. I heard from friends still at the company that Chad was popping champagne. Day 3 passed. The launch went live. The stock price soared. Chad was on the news, being hailed as a visionary. Day 7 arrived. The deadline. At 9 a.m. on Monday, exactly 1 week after my firing, the Teknova server looked for my fingerprint scan. It didn't find it. Instantly, Project Ether initiated the lockdown protocol. The entire database encrypted itself with a 256-bit key that only I possessed. The AI model went offline immediately. Every computer screen in the corporate headquarters turned blue with a single, blinking message. Admin authorization required. Contact system architect, Sarah J. I was sitting on my balcony, drinking coffee, when my phone started ringing. First, it was IT support, then HR, then chat, then the CEO. I let it all go to voicemail. By noon, the global logistics network that relied on our software had ground to a halt. Trucks were stranded. Ships couldn't dock. Teknova was losing approximately $10 million an hour. The stock price was in freefall. At 1 p.m., a black limousine pulled up to my apartment building. The CEO of Teknova, a man who had never spoken a word to me in 5 years, was knocking on my door. He looked sweaty and desperate. "Sarah," he pleaded, standing in my hallway, "please, fix it. We are hemorrhaging money." "I can't," I said calmly, taking a sip of my coffee. "I don't work for you. Accessing your systems would be illegal, wouldn't it? After all, you fired me for corporate espionage. I wouldn't want to go to jail." "We know Chad forged the emails," the CEO admitted, his voice cracking. "We found the logs this morning. He's fired." "Please, Sarah, name your price." I smiled. I pulled a pre-written contract out of my drawer. "I don't want my job back," I said. "I want to be hired as an external consultant. My fee for emergency system restoration is $2 million, plus a public apology issued to all major tech news outlets, clearing my name completely." He signed it without reading. I walked back into the Teknova building, wearing sweatpants and a hoodie. I typed in a 12-character password, scanned my thumb, and restored the billion-dollar company in 30 seconds. As I walked out with my check, I saw Chad. He was sitting on the curb outside, holding a box with his personal belongings, crying into his hands. I didn't even stop. I had a vacation to book in Fiji. They say your wedding day is supposed to be the happiest day of your life. For me, it was the day I burned my entire world to the ground, and I did it with a smile on my face. My fiance, Mark, was perfect. Or so everyone thought. He was handsome, successful, and charming. We had been together for 4 years. My sister, Emily, was my maid of honor. She and I were inseparable growing up. When I got engaged, she cried more than I did. I thought they were tears of joy. I was so incredibly stupid. The night before the wedding, I was at the venue, doing a final check of the decorations. My phone died, so I picked up Mark's iPad, which he had left on the table, to check the time. A message popped up on the lock screen. It was from a contact named Pizza Place. The message read, "I can't wait for tonight. Her dress is ugly, anyway. I look better in white." My stomach dropped. I knew that tone. I knew that voice. My hands trembling. I guessed his passcode. Oh, because he's lazy and opened the messages. It wasn't the pizza place. It was Emily's number. I scrolled up. It wasn't just a fling. It had been going on for 6 months. There were photos, graphic ones. There were messages about how boring I was, how they couldn't wait until the wedding was over so they could use my family's money to travel, while I stayed home and played housewife. They mocked my intelligence, my body, my dreams, my own sister, and the love of my life. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. I wanted to cancel everything. I wanted to scream, but then a cold calmness washed over me. Canceling the wedding would be too easy. They would spin the story. They would say I got cold feet. They would make me the villain. No, I needed everyone to see them for who they really were. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I spent hours taking screenshots. I compiled every nasty text, every compromising photo, every insult. I put them all into a slideshow presentation. The next morning, I put on my wedding dress. I smiled at my mother. I let Emily fix my veil, fighting the urge to slap her hands away. "You look beautiful, sis," she said, hugging me. "I'm so happy for you." "I know," I said. "I love you too." The ceremony began. I walked down the aisle. Mark was standing there, looking dapper in his tuxedo, wiping a fake tear from his eye. The church was packed. 300 guests. My family, his family, our friends, his boss. The priest began the ceremony. He got to the part where he asks if anyone here present knows of any reason why this couple should not be joined in holy matrimony. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Usually, there is silence. But this time, I turned to the priest and said, "Actually, Father, I have a few reasons." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Mark looked confused. "Honey, what are you doing? Is this a joke?" "No joke, Mark," I said, grabbing the microphone. "I'd like to make a toast before we say I do." I signaled to the best man, who thought this was a planned surprise, to play the video on the massive projector screen behind the altar. The first slide appeared. It was a screenshot of a text from Mark to Emily. "She has no idea. She's so stupid." The crowd went silent. The next slide, a photo of them together in a hotel room, timestamped last week. Then, a text from Emily. "I can't believe you're marrying that cow. But, at least, her dad is rich." My mother let out a scream of horror from the front row. Emily froze, her face draining of all color. Mark lunged for the projector cord, but my brother, who I had briefed 5 minutes before the ceremony, blocked him. "This," I said, pointing at the screen, "is why I can't marry you, Mark. And Emily, you can have him. You deserve each other." I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a loud thud. I turned around and walked back down the aisle. The silence was broken by the sound of my father shouting at Mark. I didn't look back. I walked out of the church doors and into the bright sunlight. My best friend was waiting in the getaway car, the engine running. "Did you do it?" she asked. "I did," I said, tearing off my veil and throwing it into the wind. We went to the reception venue, just the two of us, and ate the expensive wedding cake and drank the champagne. I lost a fiancé and a sister that day, but I saved myself from a lifetime of lies. And honestly, the cake tasted like freedom. They say money changes people. I disagree. I think money just reveals who people really are. In my case, it revealed that my wife, Vanessa, was a monster. I've always been a simple guy. I worked as a mechanic at a local auto shop. It wasn't glamorous. My hands were always stained with grease, but it paid the bills. Vanessa hated it. She wanted the luxury life she saw on Instagram, trips to Dubai, designer bags, a Tesla. She constantly belittled me, calling me a loser with no ambition. 6 months ago, on a Tuesday, I bought a lottery ticket at the gas station, along with my morning coffee. I didn't think much of it. That night, I checked the numbers. 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, 42. I checked them again and again. I had won the Powerball. $75 million. My heart hammered against my ribs. I was about to scream for Vanessa, to tell her our lives had changed forever. But then, I heard her in the kitchen on the phone with her mother. "I can't stand him anymore, Mom," she was saying. "He smells like oil. He's never going to amount to anything. As soon as I find a guy with a real bank account, I'm dumping him." I froze. I slowly put the ticket back in my wallet. I realized right then that if I told her, she would take half the money and leave me anyway. Or worse, she'd stay. And I'd spend the rest of my life wondering if she loved me or the money. So, I kept my mouth shut. I hired a lawyer in a different city. In my state, you can claim lottery winnings anonymously through a trust. I set everything up. I continued to go to work. I continued to drive my beat-up truck. Vanessa's cruelty escalated. She started staying out late. She stopped hiding her disdain. Finally, 2 weeks ago, she slapped divorce papers on the kitchen table. "I'm leaving you, Mike," she said. "I found someone else. Someone who can actually provide for me. I want the house, and I want half your savings." Our savings was $12,000. The house was mortgaged to the hilt. I looked at her, and for the first time in years, I felt peace. "Okay," I said. "You can have the house. You can have the savings. I just want a clean break. No alimony, no future claims on assets acquired after the divorce is finalized. Sign here." She laughed. "Assets? What assets?" "Your collection of rusty wrenches." "Fine. Just sign the damn papers." We went to court yesterday. The judge finalized the divorce. Vanessa walked out of the courtroom arm in arm with her new boyfriend, a guy who owned a car dealership. She looked at me with pity. "Good luck, Mike. Try not to starve." The moment the divorce decree was stamped and filed, officially ending our marriage, I walked out of the courthouse and pulled out my phone. I called my lawyer. "It's done. Cash the check." This morning, the news broke. Local mechanic claims $75 million Powerball jackpot via anonymous trust. I drove to my old house, Vanessa's house, now one last time. She was standing on the porch, staring at her phone, her face pale as a ghost. She had seen the news. She knew the trust name because it was the name of our first dog. She saw my truck and ran down the driveway, waving her arms. Mike, baby, we need to talk. I made a mistake. I rolled down the window just an inch. You wanted a man with a real bank account, Vanessa. You found one. And I found freedom. I rolled the window up and drove away. I could see her screaming in the rearview mirror, falling to her knees on the lawn. I blocked her number. I quit my job at the shop, but I gave each of my coworkers a $50,000 bonus. I'm writing this from a private jet. I don't know where I'm going yet, but I know I'm going there alone, and I've never been happier. There is nothing worse than a bad neighbor. My neighbor, Carañez. That was actually her name, was the president of the Homeowners Association, and she acted like she was the Queen of England. I bought a nice piece of land in a rural suburb. It was peaceful until Karen moved in next door. She immediately started complaining. My grass was too long. My fence was the wrong shade of brown. My dog barked too loudly. I ignored her mostly. Then, she decided to build a garage. Not just a garage, a massive 2-story detached structure for her husband's boat and luxury cars. I watched the construction start. Something looked wrong. I walked over to the fence. Hey, Karen, I said. That foundation looks like it's crossing the property line. You might want to check the survey. She sneered at me. I know my property line, you idiot. My husband is a developer. We know what we are doing. Mind your own business, or I'll fine you for your trash cans being visible from the street. I shrugged. Okay. Just warning you. She ignored me. The construction continued. They poured the concrete. They framed the walls. They put on the roof. It was a beautiful garage, and it was sitting exactly 6 feet onto my land. I didn't call the police. I didn't call the HOA. I went to the city archives and pulled the official county surveyor maps. Then, I hired an independent surveyor to come out and mark the line with neon orange flags. The flags went right through the middle of her new garage. I sent her a certified letter via my lawyer, asking her to remove the encroaching structure within 30 days. She came pounding on my door. How dare you? She screamed. These flags are wrong. I'm not tearing down my garage. I'll sue you for harassment. The survey is official, Karen, I said. You have 30 days. She didn't tear it down. Instead, she sued me. It dragged on for 6 months. In court, her lawyer tried to argue adverse possession, claiming they had used that land for years. But I had satellite photos proving the land was empty until they started building. The judge ruled in my favor. He gave her a choice: tear down the entire garage at her own expense, or pay me $100,000 for the sliver of land. Karen, being arrogant, refused to pay. I'm not giving that leech a dime, she told the judge. He can't touch my property. The judge looked at me. The structure is on your land, sir. By law, anything on your land belongs to you. You may do with it as you please. Thank you, Your Honor, I said. The next Saturday, at 7 a.m., I rented a commercial concrete saw and a demolition crew. Karen ran out in her bathrobe, screaming, "What are you doing?" I'm renovating my property, I said. I didn't tear down the whole garage. I instructed the crew to cut exactly along the property line. They sliced through the concrete slab, through the studs, through the roof. It was surgical. We demolished exactly the 6 feet that was on my side. We left the other 3/4 of the garage standing, but now it was completely open to the elements. Her husband's boat was exposed. The roof structure was compromised and started to sag immediately. "You're destroying my garage," she wailed. "No," I replied, pointing to the orange flags. "I removed the part of the garage that was on my land. The rest is your problem." Since the remaining structure was now unstable and violated building codes, the city inspector who I had called beforehand condemned the rest of the building. She had to pay to demolish the rest of it herself. She moved out 2 months later. The new neighbors are lovely. They asked me where the property line was on the very first day. "I've worked in the restaurant industry for 10 years. You meet all kinds of people. But my boss, Mr. Sterling, was a special kind of evil. He owned the Gilded Fork, a high-end bistro downtown. The food was expensive, the decor was lavish, and the staff was treated like dirt. Sterling drove a Porsche, but claimed he couldn't afford to fix the air conditioning in the kitchen. We sweated through 12-hour shifts. But the worst part was the tips. He had a policy: tip pooling. In theory, all tips are collected and distributed among the staff. In reality, Sterling was skimming 40% off the top for administrative fees and breakage costs. It was illegal. But we were all young, broke, or undocumented, and we were too scared to speak up. I was the head waiter. One night, a young waitress, Maya, dropped a tray of wine glasses. It was an accident. Sterling dragged her into the office and screamed at her until she cried. Then he told her he was deducting the cost of the glasses at retail price, not wholesale, from her paycheck. That meant she worked a 10-hour shift for basically $0. That was the breaking point for me. I started keeping a log. Every night, I took a photo of the credit card tip receipts. I recorded the cash tips. I cross-referenced it with our paychecks. Over 3 months, I calculated that Sterling had stolen over $50,000 from the staff. But I didn't just want my money back. I wanted to burn his kingdom down. I knew Sterling cut corners everywhere, not just with wages. The Kobe beef sliders, frozen patties from a discount supplier, the imported truffles, cheap truffle oil, and the kitchen hygiene. Let's just say the rats ate better than the customers. One Friday night, the busiest night of the year, I saw a reservation pop up on the system. A table for 4. The name didn't ring a bell to anyone else, but I recognized it. It was the regional director of the health department, dining with his wife and 2 friends. I assigned myself to their table. "Good evening," I said, putting on my best smile. "Welcome to the Gilded Fork." I gave them impeccable service. But when I went to the kitchen to get their main course, I made a detour. It took photos of the mold in the ice machine, photos of the raw chicken stored above the salad greens, photos of the rat droppings behind the stove. When I brought their check, I slipped a small envelope under the health director's credit card. Inside was a flash drive containing the photos and a spreadsheet of the stolen wages. "Everything was delicious," the director said. "I'm glad," I whispered. "But before you leave, sir, please look at what's in the envelope, and maybe don't drink the water." His smile faded. He opened the envelope under the table. His eyes widened. He looked at me, then at the kitchen door, where Sterling was yelling at a busboy. "Thank you, son," he said. He didn't leave a tip on the card. He handed me $200 cash directly. "For you. Keep it." Monday morning, the restaurant didn't open. The health department raided the place at 8 a.m. They found violations so severe, they shut it down immediately. But that wasn't the end. The director had passed the wage theft evidence to the Department of Labor and the IRS. Sterling was audited. They found years of tax evasion and wage theft. He was fined $1.5 million and sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. The restaurant was seized and sold to pay off his debts. The best part, the new owner was the former head chef, a good man who bought the place at auction for pennies on the dollar. He hired all of us back. He fixed the AC. And he lets us keep 100% of our tips. Sterling sends me letters from prison sometimes, blaming me for ruining his life. I don't read them. I just use them to wobble the uneven leg of my dining table. It's finally stable.